Well, I want to thank you all for taking me the time to talk to you guys and do this and actually engage in this conversation. So I do want to formally start. We can all start introducing ourselves, not just calling you one by one. You can just say who you are, where you're from or currently reside, and what your organization is or what it is that you do. So I'll start to the right of me. It's from my view is Jasmine.
Okay.
You just okay.
Okay, so I'm Jasmine. I am the founder of Black Girls with Gardens. By day, I am a mental health therapist. Outside, I consider myself an urban gardener. I am located in Pensacola, Florida, which is North Florida. That's pretty much needed from me.
This is good. Thank you. Dominique. Oh, wait, your microphone.
I'm so ready, and always mess up on mute. So hi, y'all. I'm Dominique Charles. I'm from New Orleans, Louisiana, and I live in Washington, D.C. I live in Northeast D.C. I have a garden collective called Plots and Pans, and I used to showcase my own garden, but now I typically build gardens for other people, and I do garden consultations. So basically, I like to get people started and really, really interested in gardening, and I introduce them to resources like Black Girls with Gardens and a ton of other people, but that's me.
Thank you. Ashlie?
Dang, that's crazy. We can't see which direction you're going in. I'm Ashlie, also on Instagram as the Mocha Gardener. By day, I'm a project manager in research. I'm in drug discovery, but my background is in virology. Outside of that, I just kind of, take my research experience and my love for growing in the rural communities. And, my husband and I developed our garden here on our property in North Carolina. I'm not originally from here, but we definitely want to call this home. So we take, growing our own seriously for many reasons, but I'm interested more so in really bridging the gap between food security and chronic diseases in rural communities.
Thank you. Q?
There we go. Sorry about that. Hi, my name is Quatia Osorio. I go by Q. I'm a urban farmer here located in Providence, Rhode Island. I own a homestead farm called Quaintly Farm. And I also recently just leased about an acre farm here also in the city called Journey Farm. By day, I am a wife and mother of 5. I'm a perinatal doula. I own Our Journey. I own the only cloth diaper service in the state. And yeah, so I'm a multi-entrepreneur. I'm a mompreneur. I'm not really sure what they call it. But yeah, so I got into farming because of G right there. It's all her fault. She hosted this workshop called Urban Facts. And she was like, hey, the USDA is coming. You should go. Long story short, I went. They said I could become a farmer. I was like, okay. And then I did it. And so to add to our very dismal numbers here in Rhode Island, I am a USDA registered Black farmer.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, I'm Georgina Sarpong, but everyone calls me G. Trying to see what angle to start from. So I've been in the food industry for 20 years. Started off, went to culinary school, started working in kitchens, became a chef. Then from there, started working in food justice. We both, Q and I, worked for Farm Fresh Rhode Island for a number of years, directing their farmers market program and social justice program, yada, yada, yada. And then I say that in that way for a reason. But Then from there, my partner and I decided to open up a community farm here on the west end of Providence. And just like Quatia said, you know, I was definitely invested and involved in food sovereignty for a long time, having workshops and doing policy writing and, you know, looking at the U.S. bill and all of that stuff for food, gold mines and whatever else you want to call it. But then I felt like, okay, that's nice, but I wanted to get much more deeper than just the culinary aspect or just from the policy side. It would be kind of cool to actually do what you talk about and write about. But by day, I am a software developer at RISD. And my take on this whole thing is that because a lot of things are moving in the technology road, I don't want us to be left behind, especially when it comes to agro-tech for the Black community, because that's what's going to happen if people don't step up into it. So that's where I'm at now.
Thank you. Erika? Uh-oh.
Because I came late, I kind of did my introduction. Sorry, I didn't understand. But I'll do like a quick little, y'all heard me say all the other stuff before. And I'm the co-founder and CEO of operations for Urban Growers Collective. And prior to that, I was the director of Growing Power Chicago. And so I've been farming in the city for 20 years now, consecutively. And then prior to that, I'm a trained art psychotherapist and went to SIC, so I'm an artist. So my trajectory has been really about creating third spaces and working as a social change artist who happens to have a farming background. So I'm really interested in beautiful spaces that are nourishing, and our mission kind of reflects that, but creating spaces where racial equity and economic development can happen in meaningful ways. And that's trauma informed and engaging, and then also trying to kind of address all of the kind of parallel issues that come from structural racism and how it impacts our communities.
Thank you. And I am Amber Jackson. I'm the owner of the Black Leaf Tea and Culture Shop, where I design and formulate my own tea blends. It's hand blended, hand packed. And I also host community and cultural events here in Providence, Rhode Island. I am originally from Chicago. Full-time, I work at Brown University in athletics. Academically, though, my background, my bachelor's is in nutrition and my master's is in food science. So I do come from that background. And I do want to start off on a little light note first before we just dive on into it and just ask, like, what do you grow? Like, why do you grow? What do you grow? I know, like I said, me personally, I am a beginner with my window vegetable garden that does not fit in my window anymore. So it's open floor, so you guys can just speak on like what it is that you grow and why you do it.
I'll go. I grow a little bit of everything. This is my smallest garden in years because I didn't plan on being in the city, this summer, but gotcha. Out here. But I grow sweet potatoes, collards, dinosaur kale, okra, like 3 different varieties of tomatoes, onions. So I try to focus my garden more so on things that I really eat on a regular basis. Like there's lots of hot peppers, bell peppers, onions, garlic, etc. But in years past, I had like just a bunch of random things that my favorite thing is like, I don't like to grow cilantro because I don't like it that much. I like it, but not that much. So most of the things are things that I can use, I can freeze throughout the year. And why do I grow? Because my grandparents were farmers and it's just in my blood. And I'm a PC earthy girl who likes to walk around barefoot. That's it.
I will say mine's kind of the same way too. So like I said, I'm from Chicago, but my family's from the South. So my great grandmother that I grew up with is from Nashville. And then my mom's dad's side of the family is from New Orleans. And so we grew up in my grandmother's house in Inglewood, outside Chicago. But my house was not like anybody else's in the block. except for our next door neighbor was Mr. and Mrs. Glover, and this old couple, so sweet. And we had a big backyard, so every spring, summer, we had a garden. In my neighborhood growing up, we didn't have a grocery. We had a corner store, but we did not have a grocery store. But for us, it wasn't a big thing. It's like I can go in the backyard and pick some greens, some squash, some tomatoes, bell pepper, whatever. And then our neighbor, she had a strawberry bush and she had squash, the same things we had. And so honestly, this is my first time doing a indoor garden. And so I think that's one of the main highlights of quarantining. I got to actually start my garden because I got to sit down from work for once and just breathe. And I'm like, I like doing this. It makes me feel good. I wake up in the morning, I brush my teeth, and I go look at my plants. And so right now I have tomatoes, bell pepper, lettuce, celery, it's a cucumber, oregano, parsley, basil, broccoli, and I am attempting to grow watermelon and cantaloupe inside in a big tub. Yes, I got a big. I've had the storage tub since my freshman year in college, and the lid broke, but I kept the tub. So I'm like, I can use this now, and so that's what I'm doing. Anybody else?
Well, I'm growing a little bit of everything. I've grown an interest in different variety of tomatoes and squash and peppers. So I do have at least about 15 different variety of tomatoes, 5 or 6 different variety of peppers, but I'm also growing acorn squash, straight neck squash, zucchini, about 3 different variety of cucumbers, watermelon, carrots, a few different variety of beans, onions, and a ton of different stuff. So I grow a little bit of everything like Dominique. The reason why I do it is simply because, just like Dominique, it's in my family. It's what I was introduced to. I do like to experiment a lot. I like to do my own research. I like to see what works and what doesn't work. And I love helping others. Obviously, my job and everything I pursue, all the avenues I pursue, I end up helping others. So I utilize my garden to figure out what works, what doesn't work, and so I can share with others. I think that covers the questions you asked.
Anybody else?
Like everyone already mentioned, like a little bit of everything. And my family is from West Africa, so there's just certain things that they just want, and so we're growing it. So somebody said potatoes, so we're doing potatoes, but we eat the greens. So we eat the greens. We're growing jute leaves, a lot of hot peppers, and different specific other greens that I don't really know the actual term for. It's just like these old African ladies have seeds in their little pouches, and they just hand it to me, and I'm just growing them. But I know what they are, so that's really exciting. And like someone mentioned too, my family, even though we're obviously from Africa, but they were farmers too, and I didn't expect that I would ever grow anything ever. And it's just a natural thing. So I'm really excited to kind of go in that direction.
Nice. And I also want to touch back on what Jasmine, I believe Erika said it earlier too, about how it kind of, at least for me, it really ties into my self-care routine now. I believe Q called it a dirt therapy. Because I realized I've always had houseplants, but I haven't grown a garden inside. And when I went to mix my soil, and I'm just I like this. This is the feel of and everything like that. It's actually very soothing. And I feel in today's age where, self-care is being so heavily promoted, even through social media, I think that's one thing people really haven't really spoken of, the actual self-care component of growing your own food. All right. Anybody else want to touch on that one?
I think unknowing a lot of individuals, like when it speaks in reference to like, it's a big trend of people getting into plants or starting gardens and things of that sort. It is unknowingly nurturing and has a lot to do with self-care and just it's a spot where you're able to just mentally pause and you don't necessarily have to think a lot or think about life, basically the future or the past. You can just live in the present. And a lot of individuals unconsciously are in that moment and they want to continue to relive that moment. So you see a lot of people binge buying plants or like really diving deep into gardening. And I think honestly, just from my professional background, I think it has a lot to do with the fact that it is mentally soothing. And although they not really knowing, okay, this is self-care, this is really, really helping me. I didn't know that I bought 10 plants because it made me feel good at that moment, but that's basically what's happening with them. And I think that has a lot in reference to like when you put your hands in the dirt and things of that sort.
Ashlie, were you gonna say something?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like many of you, my family is from New Orleans and from South Carolina. So, you know, my roots are in the South, and we know most of them were, you know, come from an agricultural background. But I found that a lot of them moved away from that. So we don't have any more farmers. And I think that, you know, even though many of us went off and pursued education and went to the cities to start our careers, you can tell that there's this element, this ancestral element of this desire to grow and have more control over what you consume and what you feed your family. So I think, you know, seeing so many of my family members, you know, with chronic diseases and my love for plants, you know, we can't rely on our environments to feed us. We have to build our environments. And so when I kind of understood that concept, you know, I wanted to begin to understand, like, how do I make my own food? How do I grow it so that I know what's in it, you know? Instead of, you know, our families, they go to what's easy. And of course, that's kind of what's pushed to you. But I wanted to open my family's palette, you know, teach them something different, go back to where we came from. So I'm growing a lot of different things. I'm growing a lot of different things that I don't normally eat. But once you start to see it, you start to appreciate it. And once you appreciate it, you start to taste the flavors and you start to think about the ways that you can cook it. And so I'm opening this idea of different food varieties to, you know, my sick grandparents, my family who gravitates towards hamburgers. There's nothing wrong with that, okay? Because a good hamburger is okay. But, you know, showing them, you know, what you can do with an eggplant, what you can do with artichokes, what you can do with the various types of tomatoes and peppers. You know, that's important, and it gets us back connected to the earth and to our food.
Oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to chime in. Like, I think, and I also wanted to make this kind of clarifying point. My grandparents definitely were farmers, but my sister and I also joked about how we never saw this being my path, just because I've always, I mean, I think I'm a girly girl, definitely into sorority life and all the things, but then it just kind of happened. And I think sometimes we have to acknowledge the joy and just sometimes falling into something. And like, I fell into gardening by a friend just making me a garden. And then, like, I guess in time, my grandmother was still alive, not my grandfather, but I would talk to her about it. And then I just started to like dive deep, you know, dive in. But I think that there is joy, because I hate to be like, we get really deep about it, but sometimes we do get really deep when sometimes it's just like somebody grew a tomato, they loved growing this one tomato, and all of a sudden it kicked off a whirlwind experience for them. And I think that we don't always acknowledge that, you know, a finance person like me just one day decided I wanted to do this, somebody gifted me this, and this became a thing. And I think the self-care portion and just mental, et cetera, it sometimes come from simple pleasures and simple joys, and it's not always an ancestral path. You know what I mean? I think we can acknowledge that, but sometimes we can also just keep it really light and say it's just joy sometimes.
Mm-hmm. So I do want to go into my next question, which you guys kind of previewed a little bit. Because we're in the day and age of social media, and you see, like, we all have these different gardening pages or plant pages. Do you think, well, one, is it an actual increase of Black women interest in gardening, or is it just being displayed more? And do you think it is a trend, or is it more of a lifestyle change where we're trying to, find our way back to our roots, to what we were used to doing before?
I think it's all of those things. I mean, it's definitely, I think there's a lot more interest, especially with all the correlations between Black women's health and, maternal mortality rates around like just food and diet, and having the therapeutic benefits of gardening and the exercise and all of those pieces that are kind of like come together. So I think that it's definitely like trending in a way that's not just, a fad, but I think it's a real, like a deepening of the reclamation of, like kind of along with all the other things that we're, beginning to reclaim all of our cultural losses that happened through, the transatlantic slave trade. My people are from South Carolina, and my spiritual path led me to kind of like find out about all those things, and to reclaim what my ancestors, what was taken from them. And a big part of that was this agricultural knowledge, and like knowledge of medicinal plants and when to eat them and how to prepare them and all of those pieces, and tapping back into it. I think that there's a collective consciousness that we're all kind of coming back home to all those things. And whether it's small, having a container garden or a house plant kind of fetish. I know a lot of sisters who have that, to like, going into urban ag or going into rural ag, or like wanting to be farming and doing all of this, like this full like diversity of how we're expressing that reclamation in ways that are really powerful and economic, so I see it as something that's definitely deepening. It's exciting to see, be part of.
Anybody else?
I could say for me, so, and 2G really introduced me to the world of all this. I'm a doula. My career path is midwifery. So I think to Dominique's stance, I kind of fell into farming. I feel like I was pushed into farming, but I fell. I was willing. And I mean, I think when you're not in a group, once you kind of find that tribe, you find out there's so many more of you. So I think it was like going to Bugs, Black Urban Growers and Farmers Conference. I was like, there's all these Black people that grow. Like I was just amazed that there were so many of them. And then attending gardening and farming, and I'm on the Instagram for Black girls who garden, and you find out that there's more of you when you're in it. So I don't want to say that I think it's a trend, like for me, because I didn't even know this existed until it became a part of my life. So I don't know how more many there are. I thought I was like, kind of like an oddball out a little bit, and then found out I was just vibing with my tribe, and I just kind of was late to the party. Or maybe on time.
You're on time. That's okay. You came. That's the point. You made your way to the party. That's all that matters. So I think that's really important. I think, because of social media, everyone's trying to like follow a certain trend and you have the women who's like, they take pictures with their plants and show like, oh, I have plants too. And then you have some that are truly just like, I'm finding my way back. It's therapeutic. And like Ashlie was saying, it's, in the Black community, there's such a higher rate of health deterioration and things like that. And so we can combat things these ways holistically and naturally, and we're learning more about them. And I think definitely through quarantine, I think also just me being at home more, I'm seeing it more also. But it's definitely makes my heart happy. I think I want to dive in a little more into also, why is it so important for the Black community to learn how to grow? How do we implement these incentives and programs in our communities? That's for anybody.
I think it's important. Well, obviously for health reasons, it's super important because we are hit a little bit more heavy when it comes to health disparities, and we do suffer from food deserts way more than any other. I would say our community does way more than any other race. So I think the things on top, that's like the main reason why we need to start considering growing our own food and actually having more accessibility to healthy food. That's not something obviously we have like 10 fast food restaurants, which is nothing wrong. Like what Ashlie said, there's nothing wrong with eating a hamburger every now and then, but that's like our main source of food. And we have, and it's a high correlation to how it's affecting our bodies and the death rate and things of that sort. So I think it's super important that we start, if we can just introduce, like in reference to Black Girls with Gardens, my whole initial purpose was if I can just understand that gardening is like one of those sharing hobbies, or it's like one of those community binding, creating hobbies. So if I can just show one person they could grow a tomato plant, or if I can show one person that they can grow cucumbers or something like that, they don't necessarily have to have a farm. They don't necessarily have to have a homestead, but they can specialize in cucumbers, or they can specialize in peppers, and their neighbor or their cousin or sister can specialize in okra. And then we have this community of where we're back to what we used to do, is bartering, and we have access to food. We're not outsourcing to companies that are pushing food that they feel the need that they have to mass produce, and they're choosing quantity over quality and things of that sort. Just if we can go back to bartering, but with modern technology, what we have now, I feel that we can significantly like just help, just basically just heal our community. Obviously gardening is multidimensional. It's not linear. There's tons of ways that you can get into it. You can definitely benefit and things of that sort. But I just see the importance that if we can just get one person interested in growing one thing, I think it'll take, just like for everybody else, once we got started, it just takes off from there. And it'll definitely be like one of those ways we can help heal our community.
Yeah, I think I look at it from the economic sense, especially with the bartering, but also just knowing that you can grow your own. So if it's one thing that you enjoy, whether that's your one thing is tomatoes, your one thing is kale, or your one thing is collards, or whatever it may be, if you can grow those at home and be conservative with your water, you could also do it for cheaper, and especially organic food. Like I think for me, it's important to grow. Everything I grow is organic because it's cheaper for me to grow organic at my house and have it in excess than it is for me to go to Whole Foods or whatever the grocery store is and buy organic from there. So I just think a lot of things for me always come back to dollars and cents. It's always financial. And I think that we can make smart financial choices by bartering. If I really focus on, I'm going to do all kale, all collard greens, or just greens everywhere. And, my next door neighbor is like the okra lady. And then the lady down there is the tomato lady. We can really get something going. But, it's for me, it's straight up economics and making smart financial or not smart because it's not smart, but making strategic financial decisions.
And that's really important to touch on too, because understanding that there is an actual cost of living. Buying food is expensive. Buying healthy food is even more expensive.
Well, there's also the cost of gardening too, and gardening and farming, because I think sometimes people think it's so cheap to grow your own. But when I start gardeners out, they are often very surprised at these startup costs and all the things that go into it. But it's not for the faint of heart. But if you want an excellent product, you have to set up your foundation with really, really strong ingredients. So
And I also want to touch back on what Jasmine said about food deserts. Last time I read, I believe it said that 23.5 million Americans live in a food desert, which means, they don't have that healthy, nutritious food is not readily accessible or affordable to them. And so I, being, raised in Southside Chicago and Inglewood, like I said earlier, we had a corner store. But, I was blessed to be in a household where my grandmother had a car, my mom had a car, my aunt had a car. So if we needed to go to the grocery store, we can rack up, put in the car, and come home. But if you're on the bus, how could you possibly, have adequate food sources if you can't, even have it across the street or a couple blocks away from you? When you have to leave your entire neighborhood, your entire community to go to a whole other side of the city to get fruits and vegetables, and that, like I said, it's not just, I don't have, adequate food source, I don't have nutritious food. That leads into so many other problems as far as heart conditions, cancer, and other deteriorating conditions. And I think that's one thing people don't talk about as much when they do in relation to food deserts. It's just, they don't have food right there. Okay, what else does that lead to? And that's the conversation that people definitely need to have. I do believe I was long gone for college. I came back home and they put a grocery store there, and my grandma sent me to the store if you have a barbecue, something to get some bell peppers, I think, because she didn't do a garden that year. And I walk in and they just put a grocery store there to say put a grocery store there. You walk in, it's gnats flying everywhere. Half the produce isn't even good. So they put a grocery store there just so they can say, we can label it as not being a food desert anymore. But the food that was in there still was not quality food, which blew my mind. And so once again, going back to making your own food, and actually, like I said, quality over quantity, which is definitely very important to literally the sustainability of a community. Your community is your people. How are you building your community, and obviously how are you taking care of your community? And I think over the years that's been lost. Like you said, generation after generation, where before it was like, you bartered with your neighbor. Some people don't even go check on their neighbors anymore. But I think that's I'm happy to see that we're finding our way back in that manner.
Yeah, I want to talk about, I live on the north end here in Providence, and our closest grocery store is Stop and Shop, but you have to walk on a highway that the sidewalk just randomly stops to quit, only one side. You got all these cars passing, and you see people with those hand carts with their kids or the carriages trying to get over to the grocery store over there on Stop and Shop on Branch. And so, when I decided to do, my homestead farm, I do grab bags. My bags are $12. They are designated and targeted for the BIPOC community because we have wage disparity. As long as I grow not for profit, and I acknowledge my privilege to be able to do that. My husband pays our bills, and so I grow food for our community with love. And I only charge what I need to so that the government checks the box. Other than that, I just give from the heart. So, I made sure when I started, I was EBT SNAP certified right off the rip, just in case people need it. And, that's the way I set up. I do it right from my front porch. People show up, they get a bag, or a matter of fact, Amber, you got a bag. We do the whole tour. We do the tour, we go, we clip everything together, and I feel like bringing the community into that space so one, they could see it. It's kind of like you go over someone's house, you welcome into home, like, here's where we are, this is what we have, this is what I have to offer, what would you like? And, we got some knives and some scissors, some culinary scissors, and me and Amber went and clipped, and and she ate, and it was a blessing. And so I was intentional in the fact that if I was going to create something for my community, I had to be realistic about it, because I believe in the state of Rhode Island we make 57 cents on the dollar. And so in our housing, we're in a housing crisis like a lot of people, people having to choose between eating. I noticed, like, I was a food stamp recipient. I was a food stamp mom in the beginning. I know what it's like to have to shop at those places to stretch that one time, meal. You could get a bag of potatoes, or you can get these potato spuds and add a little bit of milk with a little bit of water, stretch it out over a while with a big old margarine tub, not butter, but margarine, because you have people to feed and you needed to do it. One of the best things about farming was I also was able to fall back in love with canning and the history of Black women in canning in the church and civil rights. And what sustained us through a lot is the fact that we were prepared. And I think we're not as prepared. Well, I mean, what are we preparing for? Whereas I feel like the generations before us felt like there was something to prepare for. So you will go in their house and they'll be like, give me that jar of green beans. Give me them beans up there. Give me them tomatoes. They had supplies. Now, no one was saying Armageddon was going to happen then. Though most of them were religious and, Jesus was coming any day. But they was always ready. Food was not something that they didn't have in abundance. And I feel like a lot of it is we don't have churches that open up, on evenings to teach canning classes. Folks don't know how to cook. Y'all know these box betties. They burn water. They can't make waffles, even with the directions on the back of the flour bag. They can't do it. And so I think it is life skills. It's home economics. It's folks don't get dropped off at their grandmama and them's house long enough to get the necessary skills so that they can then continue to go ahead, Dominique, jump on in, girl. I see you mouthing over there. Jump in.
First of all, I don't need to be on anybody's panel because I will talk everyone to death. But I was like, but grandmama's still working.
Right. Or she got someone's kids.
Right. I mean, I think it's a different woman. It's a different person. We're not in the same space. And I think I hate to be like the person who always got the opposite to say, but I do think that sometimes we look at history with rose-colored glasses and we're like, oh, well, people were canning and whatnot. Well, they were canning because they were on the farm and, they may not have had money to do anything else. And it wasn't because they were canning for survival, for Armageddon, or for Jesus or anything, but it was really, this will be got to stretch, So it wasn't
good point. Good point. I can take that perspective too.
Right, because it wasn't always about, we didn't have, two people, you don't have money. This person has a little bit to get the potatoes to stretch the, do the spuds and butter or margarine or, that whole concept. But then this person lives on the farm. So how am I going to make this stretch? I'm going to make it stretch by canning it. So, I mean, I get it, but I think there's so many different layers to it that
it's very complex.
Yeah.
It is very complex. And you're right. A good point. It's the great grandmothers nowadays because grandmas are working, and I feel like for me, I shelled peas at my great grandmother's, not my grandmother's. That's what it was for me. And so, for me, I know even for my kids, like, I'm like, all right, who's cooking dinner? And they're like, well, how do, what are we going to do? And how are we going to cook? And realizing even myself trying to come up out of struggle and having children, that by me giving them more, I gave them less, so that they actually didn't have a lot of the skills that I had at a younger age, because we went in the kitchen burning at 8. But, you tell people you got your kid in the kitchen at 8, they're ready to call DCYF on you. So, I think it's very different. But for me, canning, baking bread, just those little things, they have made such a difference to me in my life. And the fact that I'm able to say, oh, we are out of bread. We got everything we need to make bread, so let's make bread. Or, I saved my tomatoes from last year and I canned them. And so over the winter, I didn't actually need to buy any, froze my peppers. So I didn't need to buy any. And that felt good because I was prepared. So that's what I have to offer to it.
I think also another layer of it is that the examples or anchors in your own community, there's an economic standpoint, there's so many different perceptions of it. But for me right now, where our space is in a fast moving area, right on a busy street. And the other day, just for an example, we're there cleaning up stuff, watering, doing what we was doing, and these kids are on their bike just being, obnoxious and flipping and all of that right in front of our space. And I felt like Big Ma. I was like, boy, get off that bike, come over here and grab me that mulch, let's do this. And then he's looking at me like, who are you, But it's from that day moving forward, those young men, they now come back every Sunday. I don't know them from Paul, meet them Adam, but they know they call me Big G. They come on down. When stuff is harvested, they can take it home. But for me and my partner, that's just being an example in your community. There used to be, and just like Dominique and Q was talking, that times have changed. Things are moving much more faster. Technology definitely has a big part to play in that, and thankfully in a lot of cases. But if we don't become the pillar, for those who decide to do that, it's not for everyone, but for those who decide to become a pillar in their community and show that, yes, you can do this too. Yes, there's a way for you to do it. And for the kids that are watching you too, they have something to go back to school and talk about other than, gang banging, gun shooting, or whatever else that these other teachers are expecting them to talk about. They can actually go on their virtual learning and say what they did on Sunday. They met some lady named Big G, and they were at her little gardening space learning how to grow okra or cleaning up. And like I said, my partner, my boyfriend, he is very handy. So he's teaching young men how to build beds, because a lot of the beds that we have there had broken off. So he's like cutting wood with them. Don't know these kids from nowhere. All I know is that I found out they live literally 2 minutes from me. And then I met their parents, and that's how that community starts to rebuild itself. You know what I mean? And I think that's very important. And one thing I want to touch upon is that everyone's been saying it, and I think someone actually said the word earlier on the call is Sankofa. My father is Ghanaian. He's from Ghana. So the language Twi has been in our household for a long time, and is basically go back and get it. It's in your cell, it's in your DNA. Like whatever you're planted on this earth to do, you will never go so far from it, even if you think you are. You know what I mean? Like, even if you go off and become an astronaut, if your place in this world is to go out and lay tar and make road, you're gonna find your way somehow, some way to go back and doing that. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think for us Black women, the reason why we see so many of us having these wonderful groups and finding and reconnecting, because we are going back and getting it. We are actually living through the Sankofa time. You know what I mean? No matter what kind of career path we may have, for whatever reason, that is within us. No matter if it's just as simple as stumbling on planting a tomato, no matter if you decided to go out and do it, it's actually an ancient word. That word, because when people started saying it, I had to ask my dad and I heard them talk about it a long time ago. But after the old Akan Empire had fell down, there was a lot of different groups emerging, and these groups were now known as different countries. We're trying to go off and do something different, like we ain't doing this no more kind of thing, but they kept finding their way back to their soul purpose. Like, if you're from a certain part of Africa, you are good in trading. That's your thing. Like, it's in your blood, your DNA memory will capture that. The same thing with healthcare, maternal work, finance, all of that is it's something that you gravitate to, because that's what's within your DNA. So just like us gardening, that's within our DNA. So just keeping that in mind, we're living in the Sankofa time. And whenever you guys get a chance to really dig in and learn about that term and where it comes from, you guys should definitely check it out.
Great. Thank you. The last question I want to ask is, how do we create these communities? how do we implement these programs in our communities and things like that? I know, Erika, you are one of the founders of the Urban Growers Collective. Q, you have your farm. Georgina, you have a farm. Jasmine, you created your platform with not only the Instagram page, but even the Facebook group that I'm a part of. Y'all bring me so much joy every day in that Facebook group. Dominique, you're actually creating plots for people. Ashley, the work that you do as well with food security. How do we bring all these things together to create this community for people so that we can continue to actually increase interest and pass these traits down of how do we do this? How do we take care of ourselves? And not just not just raising interest, like make sure they understand why it's so important that you do what you do. Even with we spoke earlier about the issues that you had, even creating your farms, whether it be from the government stage, from people in the community. So how do you create these communities?
This right here, what we're doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, see, it's on recording, so if it's publicized in some kind of way and people who are interested in it will watch it. Mm-hmm. The social media pages that are happening right now, because again, times have changed, and once everything is digital in a sense, so once people are obtaining and retaining the information from social media and have the confidence to go out and do it, then they're going to take that piece of seed that they've gained from watching this or going on a social media page and do it in their community, and they know they have virtual support. You know what I mean? So that's the beauty. This right here, I think, is a good step.
Yeah, I'm here because of G. G welcomed me into her space, and I created space. And then I think in our community, people before COVID, and we were, isolated, a lot of us was having gatherings. Like we have a friend here in Providence, Jasandra. She is a vegan chef. I'm not vegan, but I eat vegetables, so I was down. And we decided to do a potluck, like literally held it in my driveway. I put up my pop-up tent. We whipped out the tables, the chairs. I pulled out my projector, threw my stereo on, and we sat and we literally communed like right there. And we talk about eating and sharing and growing. And now that has evolved to a Facebook group for Rhode Island urban farmers. And we're there again together, bringing other people in, and then being like, oh, someone was like, oh, I grow potatoes. I was like, I've never grown potatoes because it seems difficult. They was like, you just get these buckets. Again, like, oh, okay, I'm gonna come over, or send me a picture of how you did it. And it just blossomed from there. I think we are such giving people, and we love to give from the heart, and sharing our knowledge. It's what builds, and then we bring other people in. And for me, I mean, it's been a beautiful thing, because it's just wonderful to know that I have more people when I can't get in touch with G or Jasandra that I could talk farm language or gardening to, and share with, and share seeds and learn about seed saving. Like, it's been great. There's virtual platforms, but also on a local level, it's been really beautiful. And then hearing about people being like, hey, Q, I started growing cucumbers, and I'm like, yay. So yeah.
I think something that happens is also just support. I think supporting one another. I will be honest and say I got jealous of this girl's garden, and I was like, why? Like, it don't make no difference to you. Like, just support it. And I think it's one thing. G, you said something about having social media, but I think also using your platform for good, because you can have social media, but if you're not doing anything with it, I think it's awesome. And you already know I'm coming for you. But Jasmine, like, honestly, I didn't know Jasmine from a can of paint. At one point, we were messaging each other so much. I was like, she's like my best friend. She's like my garden friend. Like, really supporting each other and really, like, get it in there. She posts different people's gardens all the time, and the things that they're just resharing, right? Another lady, Tammy, in the garden, she does the same thing. But I think that making sure those of us who have these massive platforms, making sure we're constantly sharing, but even those of us who don't have massive platforms, make sure we are supporting, popping into this person's live, and whatever the case may be, because just showing each other that we're interested, or maybe you aren't even really that interested, but those numbers for the insights are helpful for somebody. So, just supporting people is just a big part of this, and just so awesome to me.
Dominique, that's a really great point that you brought up. It sounds almost superficial, but really that exposure on social media, it matters. A lot of us, we need that visibility, and we need that visibility to one another. We need to know that I see you, like, sister, I see you. Because I think, outside of social media, there's a lot of barriers that we have to go through, and to stay connected in some way, whether it is social media, whether it's dropping in or sending a message, or like you said, popping into someone's life, like, that's significant. And it has nothing to do with that superficial validation, but that true, authentic, familial validation of, we're a community, like, we got to stay connected. Just liking your stuff, or just scrolling on by and I see you, but letting that person know, like, I want to connect with you, and I want to see you prosper. I want to see you grow. Like, we could do this together. We could learn together. I'm not an expert grower, but I can tell you, I will drop in Jasmine's inbox in a heartbeat and just say, Tim in the garden. I like to do that. And I hope that from this conversation that I will, drop into you guys just to say, I see you. We hear that phrase being floated around a lot lately, but it's different when I can actually say, no, not only do I see you, but I want to actually see you grow. I want to see you survive. I want to see you prosper. I want to see you with love and healthy, and I want to see you glowing. So no, there's weight to that, and I get it. I'm getting it. And I'm not fully there, but I think it's just a journey in learning how do we grow us? How do we grow, our communities? How do we grow not just our people, but those who are connected to us as well? So, when I see, social media booming with growers, I love it. Okay, listen, Shavonda, I think she's starting her new little garden adventure. I'm like, wow, her tomatoes are huge. I love that. I want to see us getting excited about playing in the dirt. I want to see us getting excited about this Monstera that we got from the store, whether it's from Home Depot or some organic grower. Like, I love that. I love seeing that even if we are not growing organically, you made an effort. I actually just spoke to some person on my social media who came down on someone. I'm not going to give too many details. You can find it in my feed. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. But there's someone who came in and said, all of this stuff about organic growing and this Monsanto. Yeah, that's true. I agree with you. And that's why I choose to grow organically. But why shame people for learning? Why shame people for trying? You see, I think that if we can get them in, no matter how you're growing, we can teach them why organic is better. We can teach them, what the differences are. But I like the community that Black Girls with Gardens is fostering. It's a haven. And I think that, building a place where we can feel safe to discuss things that we don't know, because in the world, sometimes you got to act like you know everything, but you don't. We don't know everything, and we're not going to. But to have this safe space where we can have this dialogue and talk about various things, I think that that's what it's about. That's the connection. And that's what I'm looking forward to in this time that we see this influx of growers.
Thank you. I did have one last question I actually forgot for Erika, because I because I'm from Chicago. And so when I learned about the Urban Girls Collective, I was so surprised because it has so many different compartments to it. Because in my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, you have an after school program too for kids. And there's a bee farm. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. And so what were the steps that you took to make those things accessible as far as educating people and actually bring them to your space, whether it be the actual bee farming or the planting itself? Like, how do you start that actual programming in that matter and actually expanding upon that, especially that the city as large as Chicago?
So, I mean, I think it's the same that everyone has talked about. I mean, you kind of start with yourself, like I started off with a desire to solve a certain kind of problem, and I saw space and I didn't understand why I couldn't access the space. And I just happened to be in the right room at the right time to be like, why can't I farm in Grant Park? You got all that land. What are you doing with all them these grassy areas? Blah, blah, blah. I was just like obnoxious and I was younger, so I didn't care. But it was like, really, like, why we got all this grass? And then we pay for it because we're taxpayers. It's public land. Let me grow some food. And it was literally that. And I just happened to talk to another creative who was in a position of power who liked me enough to be like, yeah, that is a good idea. It's very Chicago, right? It's like so Chicago to be like, have that. And like, okay, let's see what you can do. And then literally just started that way. And then it was like, it was such a blessing because it was a layer of, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I'll just say it like this. It was a layering of programs. So like, you can't do it all at once. Like it's just like, you start gardening and like, you go, like people always want to start with like, I want to grow all these things. And it's like, oh my God, you're going to drive yourself crazy because every one of these plants, every variety has a different habit. And it's going to take you seasons and seasons and seasons to understand, to have discernment, which is my word of the week, to be able to, when you like talk to people and they can't see the green, like the different shapes, and you can't find plants, and you're like, it's such a weird thing to me to like encounter people like this where they'll look at like they'll just see grass, and it's like, no, there's like 50 different plants in that grass. Like, let me show you. And it's like their eyes get, oh, whoa. And I'm like, yeah, it's called a microcosm. So pretend this is a rainforest canopy. But no, it's just this little 10 by 10 foot piece of grass. So that's how I work. I really work that way. And so started off with that. Then it was like, oh, well, okay, someone pays somebody from the city to put flowers here. So what's the budget for that? So instead, give me that budget and let me grow food beautifully, which I wanted to do because I was tired of people saying that urban agriculture was ugly and all this crazy stuff. So I'm like, I'm an artist. I'm going to make this look cute. And I'm going to make it lush, and I'm going to make it productive, and I'm going to make it a place where, oh, well, I've been teaching. Well, why don't we I'll have youth come here and they get paid and they can learn about farming and in this beautiful space. And from that opened up all kinds of like just racial equity access, because a lot of the kids I was working with from Englewood, from North Lawndale, from, the communities that we're seeing on the news right now, they had never been downtown before. Teenagers, never born and raised in Chicago, had never been downtown. So, so I'm going to take my privilege of being in the space where I can even say with confidence, why can't I grow some food here? And create that pathway so that the young people can not only learn about this thing, which I believe is like not something to be hidden, but like it is a true privilege to be able to know and to have access to the earth to grow food, and to reintroduce that to teens who've been so disconnected from their own environments and their own like power, and to have them literally, well, I guess more figuratively, but really blossom, like to like have business people compliment them, to have these interactions with folks that would never have happened, and in a space that is Chicago's front yard. So I did that. This is our 16th year, and we'll be the only landscaping in Chicago this summer because of COVID. And it's all food, and it's food from it's all our food: okra, collards, kale, pink eye, crowded peas, butter beans. And then I grow crazy stuff like cardoons and artichokes, and like just to always try to keep it interesting. because it's also educational. But I want people when they're in Chicago walking by the garden to recognize food from their countries and to see that and to see edible landscape as part of our lives. Now, within those years, it was great. It's great to be able to grow food downtown and have that, which is rare. But like, why? The question at the time was, why can't we do this in all the communities? Why is this only downtown? And that has been the mission. And now we have 8 farms. We do all these layering of program, but it's a lot of work. It's a lot of anti-racism work. It is hard. It is hard work. And not just, the easy part is the farming. It's all the BS. It's terrifying. And, so yeah. And food apartheid too. I'm not real into the semantics, like the food desert. Like we all know what we're talking about, but I do think that additional kind of shifting around the grocery store not being in a place is like, oh, put the grocery store, you're done. When it's not that, it's much more. The food apartheid piece is very real, and it's an indicator of all these other things. So for us, it's been very much solving these massive problems through gardening, through, whether it's gardening for beauty and enhancement of an environment and for sovereignty, or for as a prelude to economic development. I mean, I think that that's why there's so many things. I would love to just be gardening, right? I would be just to one farm, one thing, but that hasn't been the journey. It's been very much this larger reclamation and like elevation of this work within these environments where we're told, oh, you can't do that there. Tell me some I can't do somewhere. When I can see it, like I'm like, well, but what? What's someone gonna golf here? No, rip this up. Let's put some food in. People are starving. And literally our people are starving. It's not like they're starving with full bellies. It's like, doesn't make any sense. And so to be able to have that knowledge and to be in community with other sisters who are doing this work is tremendous. I mean, that's such a powerful gift. And so thank you, Amber, for reaching out and for all the work. And I'm really inspired. This has been a rough ass day, really rough, and emotional. It's been a lot of tears. And so just to have this, it's time together, and to like we're all in it. Like literally, like I'm at a point where if someone values the earth in a pot on the little dusty windowsill, that there's a connection. Or I do all this, I'm old, so I've been doing this for a long time. So, but that it all matters. It all matters. Having that little seedling of passion of wanting to do the work, getting excited in the spring, thinking about that is the Sankofa. That's the return. That's activating. And all we need is a little bit, and the ancestors come up. They're so happy. They're all like, "Ooh, we got one. We got one who's going to listen. Who we can get this going again." I mean, that's what it is. And I think that we're all getting that calling back, and it's exciting. It's exciting to see and be part of. I'm so long-winded. It's been a long day. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I greatly appreciate it. That's why I think everyone else it's good after you're ready to close it out. Thank you all so much for being here and beautifully expressing yourselves and everything that this means for our community and sustaining ourselves. And so I thank you so much for doing this and sharing your thoughts.